Functionally Literate. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are covering Les Morte d'Arthur. Chapter 18. The three kings and their 20,000 men spent 6 days traveling to Cameliard, rescued King Leodegrance, and killed many of King Rience's 10,000 men. Leodegrance thanked the three kings for saving him. It is at this point that Arthur sets his eyes on King Leodegrance's daughter, Guinevere, after they were wedded, as it telleth in the book. So I take it this is the first time he saw her, and It was like love at first sight, but he doesn't set his love upon her at this time.
And see, that's another interesting difference, sort of on the same note as the chivalrous erotic love, is that marriage and love aren't the same.
No, not at all.
So Arthur, in the sort of English traditional erotic love, loved that girl that came into the camp.
Lionsies.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did not love Guinevere the same way, but still loved her. It was different. It wasn't...
Oh, no, sorry, Lyonors. Name's Lyonors.
It wasn't the same kind of love. There was a separation between matrimonial love and erotic love.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard similar things from people that have been married long enough. So that they're like, that is not the same. That's correct.
I texted you earlier in the week, Jesus Christ, Arthur fucks 3 ladies in as many chapters. I was wrong. He fucked Lyonors, but not Guinevere. But then here in another chapter, he's going to have sex with another lady. We're going to get there real soon. So the two kings, Bon and Bors, they decide now is a good time to return to their homelands, for King Claudius has likely been running amok in their lands. So Arthur offers to come with them, and they say no because he has plenty to manage in his own lands. But with all the riches they've received fighting alongside Arthur, they will have well-armored knights to stand up to King Claudius. You know, so it's like, it's fine because, like, thank you for all this treasure. And then they say that if they need reinforcements, we'll call upon you. And vice versa, if you need reinforcements, call upon us and we will be here in a moment. Mm-hmm. So then Merlin says that Arthur will not have need for them again. But in a year or two, Bon and Bors will need Arthur to fight for them as they fought for him now. All of the 11 kings will die in a day by the hands of 2 valiant knights, Sir Balin le Savage and Balin, his brother.
Yeah, so that's Balin,
and
B-A-L-A-N.
Thank you.
And Balin, B-A-L-I-N.
Thank you.
It's very confusing. Even in my head, I'm like, it's Balin and Balin, and it's Balan and Balin.
Well, I'm glad you were familiar with the names and knew to draw the distinction, because I was about to.
I might be pulling this out of my ass, but I'm pretty sure that's 2 of the names of the troop of dwarves in The Hobbit.
They did sound familiar.
I want to say Balin and Balin are 2 of the dwarves in Thorin's company. I could be wrong.
I'm sure one of them are, because it sounds really familiar.
Maybe he shortened it. Maybe it was Bali. Maybe there's no N. I don't know. Anyway.
Meanwhile,
I could be making that up.
The 11 kings retreated to Sorhot, which is a city in King Urien's land. Here they ate, rested, and healed up. And now the 40,000 Saracens, as well as the other lawless people, set upon the lands of the 11 kings.
Causing some problems.
So Castle Waynesboro was besieged first. The 11 kings lamented... I'm shrugging, by the way. The 11 kings lamented that if they hadn't been fighting Arthur, they could handle the Saracens. They further lamented that they couldn't ask Leodegrance for help because he loves Arthur, nor could they ask King Rience for help because he's fighting Leodegrance. Mm-hmm. So they put King Idris in the city Nantes, Nauntes, sorry if I'm butchering it, which is in Britain. King Idris was there with 4,000 men. King Nentris was put in the city Windison with 4,000 men. 8,000 men were sent to fortify the fortresses of Cornwall, and more knights in all the marshes of Wales and Scotland were placed, around in there. And then for 3 years, they battled the Saracens and gathered more men to prepare for war against Arthur again. Chapter 19. And so once King Bon and King Bors departed for their lands, Arthur rode to Caerleon. And on his way there, a woman comes to him with a message. This woman is Margasi, which is King Lot's wife. And with her are her 4 sons, Gawain, Gaheris, Agravine, and Gareth, as well as many other knights and ladies. She was sent to spy on King Arthur through the guise of a message. As for Arthur, he thought Margasi was hot and wanted to have sex with her. And she agreed, and they did. And Arthur begat Mordred.
Bro, that's your aunt.
Yeah, now for those of you who haven't...
or sister.
Who may have been paying attention, you may have realized that Arthur unwittingly had sex with his half-sister. Or aunt. One of the two. It varies. Arthur didn't know that, though.
He did not. Which is important because it makes this an accident.
He was just
the incestuousness was not known. However, he still has to be punished for it narratively because he knew Margasi was married.
He did know that.
So that's why there's a difference between
that first one,
Lyonors, and Morgause, is that one of them is married and he knows it.
Yeah.
But he still did it.
Yeah. So, had a dream. He dreamt of griffins and serpents burning his lands and attacking his people. He dreamt of attacking the monsters who badly wounded him before he finally slays them. And then when he awoke, the dream bothered him a lot. So he told his knights, let's go hunting.
As you do.
While hunting, he saw a hart, that's H-A-R-T, which is the archaic word for deer. So he saw a deer, and he's like, this hart will I chase. And he chased it for a long while, and then he killed it. But he chased it for so long that his horse got tired. So a servant went to fetch him a new horse. And while he waited for a new horse, he heard the strangest noise. A noise like 30 hounds combined. And then he saw the strangest beast he ever had seen. And the beast went to the well nearby and drank and filled its great belly as though 30 hounds were drinking. And then it left, making a lot of noise without a care in the world, and Arthur marveled. And then he fell asleep thinking about what he had just seen. And as he slept, a knight came to him and said, Knight full of thought and sleepy, tell me if thou sawest a strange beast pass this way. Such one saw I, said King Arthur. That is past 2 mile. What would ye with the beast? Sir, I have followed that beast long time, and killed mine horse, so would God I had another to follow my quest. Conveniently enough, it is at this moment that Arthur's servant arrives with the horse he was sent to fetch. And the knight begs for the horse, for I have followed this quest this 12-month, and either I shall achieve him, or bleed of the best blood of my body. Pellinore, that time king, followed the questing beast, and after his death, Sir Palamides followed it. So it's basically saying this is King Pellinore. This is the knight right now that is chasing after this questing beast.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm convinced is just a giraffe. I think it's just a giraffe. I don't know about the noise that it makes. I'm not sure about that, but it's described as having the body of a leopard, the head and neck of a serpent. I think it does say the hooves of a hart.
So mine didn't describe it.
Yeah.
Or if it did, I couldn't understand it.
And so I'm just like, all right, you got deer hooves, body of a leopard, so we're thinking leopard print, head and neck of a serpent, so it's long. That's a giraffe. I'm seeing a giraffe.
King Pellinore
is chasing a giraffe. The only giraffe in all of England.
And not well.
No. And I can't make sense of the hounds in its stomach or whatever, but I'm thinking it's massive, like it's big. So maybe what they're trying to imply there is that it makes a lot of noise because a giraffe is not adapted to the very thick growth forests of England. And so it's just trampling through everything, like making a ton of noise. And it's just a giraffe. That's my guess. My guess is if you've never seen a giraffe, you don't know what giraffes look like, you don't know that they exist, and then you saw one, and then someone else was like, what did you see? Describe the giraffe. I think that's about how you do it. I think it's just a giraffe, guys.
You know what? I'll take it. I like it. I'll take it. That's my new headcanon. The questing beast is a giraffe.
And he's questing. The beast is questing. That's the misnomer. You think Pellinore's questing after it. That's the questing beast. No. The giraffe is looking for a way back home. It's trying to get back to Africa. It doesn't know how it got here. He's questing to get home.
Merlin did it.
You know it was. You know that piece of shit kidnapped a giraffe just so that Pellinore could chase it around specifically to meet Arthur. Coordinated the whole thing.
Chapter 20. Sir Knight, says King Arthur, leave that quest and suffer me to have it, and I will follow it another 12-month, which, come on, man.
Very irresponsible. You have a kingdom to run.
Ah, fool, said the other knight, King Pellinore. It is in vain they desire, for it shall never be achieved but by me or my next kin. That said, he started toward Arthur's horse, mounted the saddle, and said, Gramercy, which is archaic for thank you. He says, Gramercy, this horse is my own. King Arthur says, well, you could take my horse by force, or we could have a contest to see who is better on horseback. And the other knight says, well, seek me here when thou wilt, and here nigh this well thou shalt find me, and left with the horse, which I take to mean, King Pellinore said, fuck yourself. I'm taking this horse, and left.
So what I'm seeing here happen is Pellinore's like, oh, sick, a horse. Let me take that. And Arthur's like, how about you win it from me in a joust?
Yeah.
But the problem is there's only one horse.
So he's like, sure.
And so Pellinore's like, yeah, bro.
Whenever you have a horse.
Whenever you want, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Go get you a horse.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens.
Which is just wonderful.
So in my version here, they do joust.
That'll happen here in a little bit.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Arthur sat and told his men to fetch him another horse as soon as possible.
Give me another one now.
And then while he waited, Merlin comes to him in the form of a 14-year-old boy. And then he salutes the king and asks why he was so pensive. And Arthur says that he was pensive because he had seen the most marvelous thing. And Merlin says, that know I well as thyself, and all of thy thoughts. But thou art but a fool to take thought, for it will not amend thee. Also I know what thou art, and who was thy father, and whom thou wert begotten. King Uther Pendragon was thy father, and begat thee on Igraine. That is false, said King Arthur. How shouldest thou know it? For thou art not so old of years to know my father. Yes, said Merlin, I know it better than ye, or any man living. I will not believe thee, says Arthur, who is now angry with the boy, very wroth.
Well, I mean, Arthur's at this point 18, maybe.
That's how you look at it?
I'm thinking a number of years have progressed. He's a little. I mean, these wars didn't happen in a day, you know.
Sure.
Like, so he's probably put some years on him.
It had been like a year and a half.
Maybe. Okay, so he's 16 or 17.
Sure.
He's only a little bit older than this boy.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that the boy's younger than him and is going, I know who your dad is. And he goes,
he's like, no,
how
you
the
don't.
fuck are you supposed to know that, man? You were born after I was, and I don't know who my dad is.
Right. So Merlin left, and then he returns in the form of an old man. Not Merlin.
Not Merlin.
And
he shapeshifted yet again.
Another old man. And he says, why are ye so sad? And Arthur says, I may well be heavy for many things. Also, here was a child, and told me many things that me seemeth he should not know, for he was not of age to know my father. Yes, says old Merlin, the child told you truth, and more would he have told you if ye would have suffered him. But ye have done a thing late, that God is displeased with you, for ye have lain by your sister, and on her ye have gotten a child that shall destroy you and all the knights of your realm. What are ye, says Arthur, that tell me these tidings? And the old man says, I am Merlin, and I was he in the child's likeness. Ah, says Arthur, ye are a marvelous man, but I marvel much of they words that I must die in battle. Marvel not, said Merlin, for I shall die a shameful death, to be put in the earth quick, and ye shall die a worshipful death. And so they talk about this for a little bit longer. And then Arthur's servants arrive with another horse. And then Arthur and Merlin both mount horses and ride to Carleon. And then Arthur asks Sir Ector and Sir Ulfius how he was born. You know, he's got to verify this shit. And they tell him that Uther Pendragon was his father and Igraine was his mother. And then Arthur tells Merlin, I will that my mother be sent for, that I may speak with her, and if she say so herself, then I will believe it. And so the queen was sent for, and she came with her daughter, and one of Arthur's other half-sisters, Morgan Le Fay. And Arthur welcomed them. Chapter 21. And this is the best, right? This chapter starts with Sir Ulfius standing in front of King Arthur and his whole feast, and announcing that Igraine is a false lady of the world and the most traitorous under the king's person. And Arthur tells him, now you watch what you say.
That could be my mother.
That's quite an accusation to call a king's mother a traitor. And Ulfius knows what he's about. He's as far as he's concerned, if Igraine had said something sooner, had spoken about the nature of Arthur's birth in the time of Uther Pendragon, then this great war they had all just fought could have been avoided. For the most part, none of the barons knew whose son he was, and his mother, of all people, should have made it known to Arthur and to the realm. And because she did not, she is a traitor, and he'll duel anyone who disagrees with him. Like during this whole thing, he threw down his dueling glove.
Ulfius is like, fuck her. So many people are dead.
Yeah.
It's her fault.
Yeah.
This past year's been an absolute shit show, and she could have stopped it before it ever started.
So then Igraine speaks.
I get his frustration. I get it.
Well, then Igraine speaks. She says she's a woman and she won't fight, but she hopes rather than be dishonored that someone may fight for her. And so then she goes on to say that Merlin knows, as do you, Sir Ulfius, how King Uther went to me pretending to look like my husband not 3 hours after he died and got a child with me, followed by marrying me 13 days later. Furthermore, after the child was born, Uther commanded the child be put in Merlin's care. I never saw that child again, and I did not know his name. So Ulfius concludes, oh, well, in that case, Merlin is more to blame for the war than her.
I love that she's like, I have all these very plausible explanations. And he's like, I'm already pissed. Now it's Merlin's fucking fault. Fuck Merlin. I'm not any less angry. I'm just redirecting it.
So Igraine finishes by saying that she bore a child of Uther Pendragon, but she does not know what has become of him. And then Merlin takes Arthur's hand and says, this is your mother. And then Sir Ector provides testimony of how Uther gave him Arthur to care for. So saying, King Arthur takes Igraine in his arms and kisses her, and they both wept. And then they feasted for 8 whole days. And
yeah, it's not every day you find your mom.
No. Certainly not every day the king finds his mom.
Yeah.
And so then one day after that, a squire came into court on horseback with a dead knight and told the court of a knight in the forest that had slain his master, Miles. And this squire's name was Griflet, no older than King Arthur, and he asked Arthur to make him a knight. And Arthur was uncertain about that, about giving Griflet a knighthood, but Merlin stepped in and said that if Arthur should make him a knight and go adventuring with the knight over by the fountain, then he will become a great knight himself.
Now remember, Griflet was getting unhorsed quite a bit in that battle
He sure
with the 5 kings. But he was not a knight. Yeah, he was not Sir Griflet. He was a squire. So we can forgive him his appearance of ineptitude. He was not quite up to rank yet, but this is his chance.
You got unhorsed a lot. So
Poor
Arthur did as Griflet asked and made him a knight, and then commanded him to go duel the knight over by the fountain. The other night, so he does. Griflet goes over to that other knight, and he's like, duel me. And he's like, I don't think that's a good idea. And he's like, I insist. And he's like, well, if you insist, who do you fight for? And he's like, Sir Arthur. And then, they joust. And the other knight ran Grifflet through his shield and his left side. The spear struck him in his body, and the horse and Grifflet fell down. That's the end of chapter 22. Hi, this is Functionally Literate. Hope you've been enjoying listening. This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show. I'm Ryan. I'm broke. If you could donate a little money my way with a sponsorship or a product, I'll be a shill for money. And I'm going to use that money with which to buy books, because let me tell you, right now I'm checking stuff out of the library, and it's rough. You can email me at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is FUNC.LIT.POD@gmail.com. You could also be a patron of this podcast. That's right. This podcast, Functionally Literate, we're going places. We have a Patreon now. You can give me $1, and in exchange, you will be able to listen to this podcast ad-free. That means right now, you don't have to listen to this bit. You can listen to the podcast uninterrupted. It just goes without me going on about things that you don't care about. Just for $1. And that will increase in value every 2 weeks, because there will be another ad-free episode. Additionally, if you'd like to just pitch a little money my way, like you're not interested in being a patron, you can go to my PayPal, which is also in there. I made a Funklit PayPal. It'll all be in the description. All the links in the description. Chapter 23, that knight said that if he lived, Grifflet would make a passing good knight. Somehow Grifflet lived.
He missed all the vital stuff, I guess.
And then this is where we get into everything with the Rome and Emperor, right? So the court of 12 knights, older men, they came from the Emperor of Rome, demanding truage, which is tribute. Else they would destroy Arthur and his land. So the Romans are trying to,
Yeah.
They're doing their thing.
They want Britain to become a vassal state.
They want that. And Arthur said, I'm paraphrasing here. He says, well, you're messengers, so you can say what you like. If you weren't, though, I'd destroy you. But this is my response. I owe the emperor no tribute, and I will give him none. But on a fair field, I will give him tribute with a spear or a sword, and that won't be long. So I swear on my father, Uther Pendragon. So basically, he's saying, fuck y'all, you want a tribute? You want a spear?
They said, fight me for it.
Fight me. Fight me. So the messengers leave, and Arthur's pissed about the messengers, and he's also upset about Grifflet. And so he puts on his armor and gets on his horse, and he just rides off until it's daylight. And then he sees 3 churls chasing Merlin. So Arthur chases them off and said, oh, Merlin, you'd have been slain if not for me. And Merlin's like, I could and would have saved myself. And you're nearer death than me, for you're riding towards death, and God is not your friend.
See, it's another one of those strange instances with Merlin where it's like, why was he being chased? Why was it 3 people?
I don't know.
What did he mean when I could have saved myself? I mean, there's a lot there to dig into that I just haven't had the time yet, but I imagine it has something to do with Merlin's association with pagan magic.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately sort of being just like a representation of like the earthly magic. There's sort of this differentiation in a lot of literature of divine magic and earthly magic.
Yeah.
Where divine magic comes from God or a god. And that is not Merlin.
Mm-mm.
Merlin doesn't have that. He's a druid. He's a witch. He's the son of a devil. He's, a dream reader. He is not a cleric. He's not a holy man.
Sure isn't.
But I feel like there's more to that small story, but I can't tease out what it is.
So after Merlin tells Arthur that God's not his friend, they rode together until they came upon a knight, King Pellinore, resting at a fountain. This knight insists that Arthur duel him. So they joust. Then Arthur draws his sword, and then the knight says, no, only spears. Arthur says that he only had the one spear, right? Like, what the first joust, both their spears broke. And so then the king's squire, the Pellinore squire, provides Arthur a fresh spear. And so then they joust again, and both spears break. And then Arthur draws his sword again, and again Pellinore insists on jousting, and a fresh spear is given to Arthur. And so then they joust again, and Arthur and his horse are knocked down. And then Arthur stands and draws his sword, and then says he will fight on foot, for he has been dishonored on horseback. And then Pellinore says that he will remain on horseback, which pisses Arthur off. And Pellinore...
It's not in the spirit of fair play here.
And Pellinore is delighted that Arthur's pissed. So they fight like that, and the fight was really fierce. And then Pellinore broke Arthur's sword in two. And then Pellinore tells Arthur to yield or he will die, and Arthur says that he would rather die than be so shamed, and grabs Pellinore by the middle, throws him down off his horse, and then knocks off his helm. And then that is all of the notes that I took. So I'm going to have to sum up what happens next.
One important note here is in your version, Arthur's sword is Excalibur. Now, it doesn't specifically mention that this was Excalibur that he was using.
No, so this is what gets confusing, right? Because this was the next few chapters that I didn't notate, which is after this battle, Merlin saves his ass.
Yeah, so basically what happens is, and there's some slightly different context in my version. Basically, in my version, Arthur gets unhorsed once. Just gets knocked down, draws his sword, and Pellinore's like, well, I win. And Arthur's like, get off your fucking horse and fight me. And Pellinore's like,
no.
Why would I do that? Like, I'm at such an advantage. And basically, what happens is Arthur just charges him with his sword anyway.
Yeah.
And so Pellinore gets, like, ashamed that this kid is braver than him.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, I'll get off my horse. And so he gets off the horse, and they fight, and Pellinore wins.
Yeah.
Again, breaking his sword.
Yeah.
Now, in my version, Arthur does not have Excalibur yet. That was not the sword that was in the stone.
So this is what gets confusing, because the sword was only called Excalibur in that one passage, right? All other times it was referred to as the sword in the stone. It was only called Excalibur the first time he drew it, and it blazed with the light of like 30 torches.
Yeah.
That was it. The rest of the time it was referred to as the sword in the stone. And the reason why that confused me was because I missed that the first time reading it. But then the second time when I was reading it and taking notes, after this fight, he and Merlin go and see the Lady of the Lake, who gives him Excalibur.
Gives him Excalibur, right.
So why does he have two different swords called Excalibur then? And the only answer that I can come to is that Excalibur just means sword.
Yeah, so I've never looked into like the etymology of whether or not Excalibur has a specific meaning as far as just a word. I've always only ever seen it as a proper noun.
Right.
And I've only ever understood it to be the very specific sword. But this moment is significant because Pellinore does beat Arthur. You see sort of a dark side to Pellinore here, but a logical dark side where he's about to behead Arthur because he lost the duel.
But then Merlin swoops in and
Merlin's
casts
like,
sleep on
stop! That's the High King of England. That's King Arthur. You can't kill him.
Yeah.
And he hesitates for a moment, but there's this little brief insight Mallory gives you into his thought process, which is, well, he's the High King. He's probably going to be really pissed that I beat him. And he's going to take that out on me. So I should definitely just kill him or I'm fucked. So he goes to behead him anyway. And that's when Merlin just sleep spells him.
Yeah.
And he just passes out.
And then Arthur's like, what
Arthur's
happened?
like, you killed him. Such a shame. I would have died so that such a valiant knight could have lived. And Arthur's like, no, don't worry.
You mean Merlin?
Yeah. Sorry. Merlin was like, don't worry. I just put him to sleep. He's definitely going to be very useful to you later. But you got to be careful because he will kill you. You are not nearly as good a combat as this guy. He is way better and way stronger.
Yeah.
And it's important to notice, Arthur is still technically a child. Like, he's still a teenager.
Yeah.
King Pellinore is middle-aged, and he's been doing this for decades. Like, he is a very experienced, very accomplished knight. And so it makes sense that Arthur would not be able to beat him. So that's the instance where, and then Arthur's like, oh man, he broke my sword. That's, now I got to get a new sword. Merlin's like, we're going to go get you the sickest fucking sword ever, bro.
So yeah, they go to the Lady of the Lake, which that whole interaction was weird, but I didn't take notes on it, so I can't really talk about it.
Well, so they go to the lake, which is in Avalon.
Yeah, I remember
which is important to know, because we don't know where Avalon is. Some people think it's the Isle of Man.
The Isle of Man.
But maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's really just sort of the Arthurian version of like the land of the She. It's the fairy world.
The Fae realm.
It's the other world. It's this paradisical place.
Sure.
So they go to the lake in Avalon. And the Lady of the Lake approaches with sword in hand, and Merlin's like describing like she lives in a castle in the rocks, more beautiful than any place you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So I mean, these are fairy people. This is very Tua Dedanan type stuff happening. Mm-hmm. And says in exchange for the sword, because Arthur's like, hey, give me that sword, and she's like, in exchange for the sword, you have to grant me a gift that I will name when I am ready. So it's write me a blank check.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
And he says, yeah, fine. And grabs the sword, and it's Excalibur. And so he has Excalibur now. And that bites him in the ass later. But
I mean, Excalibur is the original Vorpal sword, right? Like,
yes,
it's the sword.
Mm-hmm. When you think of like, oh, that's a sick sword, it's Excalibur. It's the sword that does everything. It's the army Swiss sword. It's whatever you need it to be, whatever magic power you want it to have. It's great. There is a fun interaction, though, on the way back where Merlin's like, which do you prefer, the sword or the sheath? And Arthur's like, oh, definitely the sword. He goes, then you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because the sheath or the scabbard is magical. And as long as you wear it, no matter how grievously wounded you are, you will not lose any blood.
Yeah, that was in my version, too. And yeah. Straight up, Merlin's just like, no, you're an idiot. Like,
yeah, like that scabbard's
the
way
scabbard is way more important than that sword.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting, that the scabbard is more important.
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense that you would want a more powerful sheath than the sword it's sheathing.
Yes, you don't put a nuclear warhead in a gun safe. It's not what it's made for. And it's not going to help.
Yeah.
So if the object that contains the weapon should be able to withstand the weapon itself.
Yeah. So for my book, chapter 24 was how Merlin saved Arthur's life from King Pellinore by, enchanting him to sleep. Chapter 25 is how Arthur, by the mean of Merlin, gat Excalibur, his sword of the Lady of the Lake. Mm-hmm. 26 is about King Rietz, who overcame the 11 kings, and he desired Arthur's beard to trim his mantle. So this was really weird. Like, literally, a messenger comes and is like,
give me your beard.
Yeah, he's like, straight up, give me your beard. And Arthur's like, I barely have a beard. What do you mean? I'm not giving you my beard.
The metaphor here is that King Rietz is like, I'm going to kill Arthur, and I want his head on my mantle. I am going to be the High King.
Yeah,
and Arthur's like,
nah.
Nope.
And so, he sent that messenger back, and, like, this guy's, like, ready to go to war with him now. And then we get chapter 27, which is the last chapter of book 1, which is screwed up, by the way. It's like barely a page. It's May Day, right? So you remember earlier we were talking about Mordred and how Arthur gat Mordred, and Merlin told him that, like, Mordred was going to be the death of him.
And God is not your friend anymore because you've committed incest and adultery.
Right. So Arthur's solution is to take all of the children born in the month of May that year, because that is the month that Mordred would have been born. He knows that. His solution is to take all of those children and to put them all on a boat, send them off, fuck them.
Just let them die.
Yeah, so they do all die except for Mordred. Mordred lives.
I gotta say, and I don't mean this in an anti-Semitic way, but that was a very Jewish move.
What do you mean?
That was very King Herod of him.
Okay.
That was very much, the Savior was born? Cool. Where? Kill every child born over there. Fuck that kid. To be fair, it's also very Pharaoh. It's very Book of Exodus, all the children of the Hebrews dead.
That didn't seem very anti-Semitic to me. That seems like a historical reference.
No, I know. I mostly said it for the shock value because it's funny to be like, that's very Jewish. But but it is, where it's like, oh, kill all the babies. And it's like, that happens in the Bible like 3 times.
Okay.
Like the Pharaoh does it once, then God does it to the Egyptians, and then King Herod does it to his own people.
Oh my goodness.
And you're like, why is everybody murdering all the babies, dude? They're just babies.
So yeah, Arthur did that, and it didn't work. Funny how prophecies tend to...
It never does. Who escapes the pharaohs? Moses does.
Moses, yeah.
Who escapes King Herod? Jesus does. To be fair, the only time it worked was when God himself did it. I guess none of the firstborn Egyptian sons got away from that.
Well, but God's the all-powerful one.
Right.
He would succeed.
And Merlin's not the one trying to kill all the babies. I think Merlin probably would have been able to do it.
Honestly, I wonder sometimes about these things. Like, did Merlin intend for Uther Pendragon to get killed that way? He didn't mention anything about that. Did Merlin intend for Arthur to kill like untold babies? He didn't mention anything about that.
So this sort of comes back to what I was saying earlier about how Merlin, I think, is sort of a representation of earthly magic. Merlin can manipulate things.
Mm-hmm.
Merlin cannot change people.
No.
So Merlin can shapeshift. Merlin can, arguably he could teleport. You know, Merlin can find you a magic sword. Merlin might even be able to make a magic sword. Merlin could not convince Arthur not to do that.
Nah, that would be more in Morgan Le Fay's wheelhouse. And
I think even Morgan Le Fay, they're manipulative.
Yeah.
Merlin gives advice, Morgan Le Fay manipulates, but neither can compel.
Mm.
That's the free will. That's, I think, if anything, that's sort of the Christian aspect that might have been injected in here, is the idea of free will, and that God has given it to you. Merlin can't force you to do anything. Although it is implied later, we'll get into it with Nineveh, or Nineveh, however you say it. The woman that Merlin is smitten with, she refuses to have sex with Merlin and makes him promise not to use his magic to get around that. Which you could either read as, okay, so Merlin does have magic that could like compel her to want to have sex with him. I more thought she meant like in the way that he got Uther Pendragon into Ingraine's bed, was like, you can't just transform into somebody else and pretend it's not you.
Yeah.
Like, promise me you won't trick me
into having sex with you.
And Merlin was like, all right, I won't. Which is probably the most noble thing he does in the entire tale. Except bring about the existence of Arthur itself, which ignoble means, but Arthur is supposed to be like the pinnacle of leadership.
Yeah, I don't know about the whole noble thing there.
That's why I'm saying him promising not to manipulate Nineveh into sex might be the most noble thing he ever does. He's just like, I won't rape you.
And even then, yeah, like literally she's like, all I ask is you don't rape me. And he's like, okay,
he's
I
like,
won't
you
rape
know what? It's a big sell, but I'll do it.
Like none of this is noble. It's all crap.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Anyway, so that's book 1 of 21 of Le Morte d'Arthur, which clearly is the unabridged version.
Yes. But yeah, what I think we should do moving forward is I'll just go off the abstracts on each chapter, and then I'll read the corresponding stuff in this book.
Okay.
That way we're on the same page.
Makes sense. So we'll read book 2 next time, which is just 19 chapters.
Yes.
That one should just be one part.
Yep.
This one was a 2-parter, maybe even a 3-parter. We'll see. We'll see how it divvies up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is the original story of Merlin and Arthur and the Sword from the Stone and Excalibur.
And we're getting into it.
Yeah.
This is it.
We hope that you've been enjoying. I was looking forward to talking about this because it's just, man, it's nuts. You know, it's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, and from Arthur, these legends, like sort of the original Arthurian legends, there's a lot of jumping off points. Like this has been sort of, proliferated through time in many iterations. Actually, I just recently got a gift that was a book. It's got a bunch of Mark Twain stuff in it, including a Connecticut Yankee.
In King Arthur's Court?
In King Arthur's Court. So that is definitely something we'll get to at some point.
Cool.
T.H. White, Once the Future King, is on our list. That's 3 books, but they're real books. It's real narrative, good prose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Arthurian legends. I mean, there's Mists of Avalon. We could read that. There's a lot of stuff to go to from here in the world of fantasy.
But yeah, so that's it though for now. Next time we're not going to be talking about Le Morte d'Arthur at all. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Zach, for being here. Yep. Thank you to Jake Weller for our music. And thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time. Bye.